This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Everyone now knows that Eric Dier plays for Monaco. A stray Nico Gonzalez boot meant the former Spurs centre-back could reprise his England-Colombia moment and slot home from the spot to deny City the win they should have really got. Arsenal are pretty comfortable winners over Olympiakos, and Newcastle are very comfortable winners at Union Saint-Gilloise. PSG win late in Barcelona. There's that high line again. Other things we already knew, like Yamin Lamal is a lot of fun and Nuno Mendes is too. The best of the rest sees Rasmus Højlund looking like an elite centre-forward. It's just incredible how many players get good when they leave Old Trafford. We'll look ahead to a Premier League weekend, including Chelsea-Liverpool and good at set-pieces Arsenal versus bad at defending set-pieces West Ham. We have confirmation of a raft of Turkish listeners. We'll answer your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hi, Max.
From the Racing Post, Mark Langdon joins us. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Max.
And hello, Lars Sivertsen.
Hello, Max.
Let's start then with Monaco 2, Manchester City 2. I like the start of Will Unwin's match report, Barry. It had been a subdued night in Monaco with Manchester City sleepwalking to victory until Nico Gonzalez kicked Eric Dier in the face in a failed attempt to defend a free kick. It's quite an accurate reflection, I think. I mean, there's a bit of controversy. Not everyone thinks that's a penalty, but it was quite the moment.
Yeah, I don't see how it could be anything other than a penalty. And I'm surprised there was controversy. Pep Guardiola seems to have been quite miffed about it. But Erling Haaland, when asked after the game what he thought, said, I didn't see what happened, but I suppose if you kick someone in the face, it's probably a penalty. I'd be a subscriber to that view of Erling's. Yeah, I don't think you can have any complaints. I think I knew Eric Dier had gone to Monaco but had forgotten and then was surprised to see him. But he took his penalty very well. I suppose, yes, Manchester City were sleepwalking to victory. They didn't play especially well against a team I think we all probably thought they'd beat fairly comfortably. Phil Foden was probably the standout performer for them. Him and Haaland. I thought Haaland's second goal, that header, was terrific. Foden's return to form is something for Manchester City fans to be cheerful about on a night when otherwise they didn't have a huge amount to be cheerful about.
Yeah, I suppose on the penalty, Lars, the counter-argument is, okay, there's not a huge amount of contact. I don't know how much there needs to be, if any. And is it that actually Eric Dier fouls Nico Gonzalez by heading his foot? Or is that not a legitimate thing? Okay, fine.
Absolutely. I feel like Erling Haaland has stolen my lines here, because I was basically going to say, well, if you kick someone in the head, there's always a chance the referee is going to give a foul. Like, you're gonna. I think we had a comment from a listener who asked, like, are overhead kicks now banned? Which I think maybe that's a slightly more interesting place to go in it. I know in this case it was a defender trying to clear it, not an attacker. But it does raise a question because of one of the goals Juventus scored. I know if we'll probably get to that game. There are similarities, like in terms of where the boot is versus proximity to opposing heads. So I think there's a question to be asked about where that leaves overhead kicks in the crowded field. And I guess very often it leaves them being given as fouls. We can all just agree, if you're a defender and an opponent is going for a header, don't go with your foot. Like, it's just very little upside to that maneuver. It doesn't make any sense, and it was really good stuff by Eric Dier, actually.
Yeah, and it did. Just watching him score a penalty mark made me think of England-Colombia, and then I watched that BBC montage. It was one of the best montages after the game, in 2018, where it just showed all the penalty misses and all the sadness, and then Dier scoring, and then Bobby Robson dancing, and Butcher and Waddle doing that. Anyway, I mean, it's not a question to you, Mark. I just really enjoyed it. I suspect, back to this game, and we should talk about Haaland, right? Because, as Barry said, the header is brilliant because he's got to generate so much pace. And the first one is just one of those, God, his legs are so long. And another one of those conversations about 7 touches in a half, and 2 of them are goals.
Yes, he doesn't get involved in the build-up, and I think that Pep Guardiola has learnt to live with that, and is trying different ways to kind of reinvent maybe what he wants to do on the pitch to suit Haaland as well at times. And why would you not try to play to Haaland's strengths when you've got somebody as good as they've got up front. I think we have seen them even in the recent weeks since Donnarumma's come in, go longer and try to hit Haaland quicker and to be more direct at times. And we do take it for granted just how many goals he scores, just because it's become the sort of the norm, much like how it was for Cristiano Ronaldo and for Messi when they were sort of scoring sort of 2 and 3s most weeks. But the header particularly is sensational. I mean, he was up against 3 former Premier League defenders, the Monaco back three, Salisu, Eric Dier and Keira, who was at West Ham briefly. So he was up against familiar foes, and probably not the biggest surprise that he managed to come out on top on that individual battle. But I think for City, so sloppy at times. This was exactly the same thing that happened against Brighton when they were in complete control. Didn't go for the sort of the killer goal that would have put them 2 ahead. Felt they could just see it out and gave away a stupid penalty. Once again, just I think there is something there for City about them just feeling they can see games out rather than play to what I still think is their biggest strength, which is in the final third and Haaland. So I think they would have been better trying to get the third goal rather than sort of sit on that 2-1.
Yeah, and Barry, every time you don't win a game or you sort of show fallibility, it just means that air of invincibility that they no longer have. More and more teams think, actually, that this isn't, they're just another team.
I don't think anyone's going to think that, as long as they have Haaland playing, as long as they have the players they do, and as long as Pep's in charge. Although it did almost get to that stage, or maybe it did get to that stage last season when they had that massive wobble. But I think it would be very naive to think of them as just another team. I mean, they hit the post or the bar twice last night, and not shots that skimmed the bar, like spanked off the bar. So on another day, they could have won comfortably. But again, I'm getting bored listening to myself saying this, these results at this early stage of the Champions League don't really matter. It's not a bad performance or a very workmanlike performance is obviously a cause for concern, but the draw, they've got 4 points from 2 games. That's fine. It's not a problem.
I am one of them people that shouts at Barry when I'm listening to the pod, and he just says,
shout at him now.
He just says every Champions League game the result doesn't matter, and eventually it must matter because not all of them can qualify.
Eventually, at some point, they will matter, but at the moment, I don't think they do.
These points, add up as you go along. And
I am aware of how this league system works.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, we're 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw. Because PSG won it from way back last season, there's this belief that you can, as long as you finish in the top 24, it doesn't matter. But PSG got Brest in the sort of in that playoff draw. Real Madrid got Manchester City, and one of them teams went out, and PSG then had then had to play Liverpool. So they won on penalties, but they could quite easily have lost that game on penalties, and people would have been saying that PSG are bottlers and that there's Luis Enrique might not even be in charge. That's how kind of fine a line and fine margins you get in football. I think you have to give yourself the best opportunity, to qualify in the top 8 initially, and it's going to be a bum fight for those top 8 spots, because there's a lot of teams that will feel like, oh well, that draw doesn't matter. We can just finish in the top 8, and we saw last year that they didn't. Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Man City, PSG all finished outside the top 8. Bayern Munich nearly went to Celtic as well. So I think you want those 2 matches off, and I think you really want to finish in the top 8, and dropping sloppy points could be costly in about 3 months' time.
Would the counter argument to that not be that Liverpool finished top of the league last season, only dropped 3 points, and ended up going out to the eventual winners in the last 16?
Yeah, but the counter argument to that is that most of the other teams so Arsenal finished very well in the league. I can't remember the exact figures, but Barcelona were semi-finalists. Inter had done very well in the league. They were semi-finalists. So I think PSG were the kind of anomaly from that. And on the other side of that, where Liverpool were really unlucky. But most of the teams that finished high up in the league phase, were then able to benefit from that. It was just that the ones that won did come from way back. So I'm not saying it's desperately important, but I think there is more importance maybe than Barry thinks, I would say.
Yeah, what a polite row this is. And I suppose another thing, Lars, is actually if you win the first, how many points do you need? 11 or 16? I can't remember. If you win the first 5, then you can rest players. There is this whole thing about fatigue. So, I don't yell at Barry. Long term, it's important for us to have a good working relationship, I suppose. But I don't know, where do you stand on the furious Glendenning-Langdon debate?
I'm really enjoying this because I'm getting early World Cup vibes. This reminds me of the discussion we have at every single international tournament when we're looking at permutations for the last round of the group stage, and we're thinking, if they finish there, they play then. The point that's always made is that you will eventually have to play good teams if you want to win it. And I guess this is true about the Champions League. But I am probably a believer in the idea that playing fewer good teams is more advantageous. If you can get a good draw for as long as possible, that it will help you go further. England fans would agree with that, I think. So I am kind of slightly on the Langdon side of this divide of actually finishing high in the league phase is quite a good idea. And at the risk of being a complete sycophant here, I'm going to give the moderator points here because I think Max, I think your point about resting players is a very good one. I think it's an issue of the schedule, as we keep hearing all the time, is really punishing. So if you can have an early you can get 4 wins on the board in this group stage, so you can just kind of cruise for the rest of it and just pick a reserve side for a couple of these games. I think that's very helpful in terms of squad planning. So I do think it does matter a little bit.
Sadly, the moderator can get no points in such a court, but I appreciate the sentiment. Arsenal 2, Olympiakos 0. Perhaps not as straightforward, Barry, for Arsenal as the score suggests. They had to, Olympiakos had a few chances, but I suppose unlike City, it was a game they sleepwalked into winning and won.
Yeah, I would say Martin Odegaard was not sleepwalking. He was outstanding in this game from start to finish. He was really, really good.
Yes, good point.
Good as I've seen him in a while. So he's clearly shaken off that shoulder injury, which I was worried about, actually. I thought that might be one that would just bother him incessantly until he was forced to have surgery or something. But he seems to be okay, to have made a full recovery. He was so good. He was instrumental in setting up both goals. He created 2 good chances that weren't converted. He should have scored, but was denied by an excellent save by the Olympiakos keeper. I would say it was fairly straightforward for them, but David Raya didn't have a huge amount to do, but he made one terrific save from Daniel Podence. Me neither. Victor Gyökeres had an interesting game, I guess. He didn't score. He was very unlucky not to score the goal Martinelli ended up, the opener that Martinelli ended up tipping over the line when his effort hit the post. Yeah, he looks kind of out of place in that Arsenal team. I'm not saying he is out of place. He sticks out like a sore thumb. Not necessarily in a bad way. I presume the goals will come from at some stage, but the goal he didn't score, where he just barged through 2 defenders onto a through ball from Odegaard, and then got his shot away. It hit the keeper and was diverted onto the post. Martinelli finished it off for him, but I think Arsenal need a player like that.
Yeah, are you saying sort of amidst all this sleek grace, he's a bit of rough? Is that
yeah, dirty bit of rough.
It's funny because he looks so clean. He's a very tidy guy. But that was always going to be. It's always going to be a little funny if you add a sort of almost like a battering ram number 9. I mean, he's not Paul Wallhurst anything up there, but he is like someone who's quite a direct, hard running centre forward to a team that for so long have played with almost various iterations of a false 9. I mean, the guy who's played up front for Arsenal under Arteta the last few years the identity has changed, but it's usually been someone who wanders, someone who comes short. They're used to having if you bring Havertz back in there, he's going to come short more and link up with the midfielders more, and he's going to look more like he fits into that. But I actually think the fact that he's a little different is what I like about him at Arsenal, because he adds a completely different dimension. Now, it might take a little bit of time for the players around him to get used to that, and it might take a little bit of time for them to spot all those runs. But I actually think that the fact that he sticks out could in the long term be a bit of an advantage.
And I suppose, look at the depth. They did have to bring on some of their A-listers. I mean, it's hard to decipher, such as their squad depth, Mark. But, to start with a good team and have Rice, Saka, Eze, Timber, Calafiori, Mosquera and Ranieri on the bench is quite something.
They have got a squad that should be able to compete on every front now, and it probably be of benefit to Arteta, that they can have strong domestic cup runs as well, just to make sure that everybody feels part of it. That could be a slight issue. You sort of went through that bench there. There'll be a lot of players that feel like they're starters, and that he's calling them finishers, but that essentially they're substitutes. And while you can share around the minutes, people want to play in the big game. So it's a different approach to Arteta came through under sort of Pep Guardiola, who is the opposite and says that he wants to work with a small squad. I think as long as you're winning, everything is okay. And the second that you don't, people start questioning, why is this player not playing? Why is that player not starting? And it can become a slight problem. But I just wanted to shout out that Raya save because 1-0, if it goes 1-1, who knows how that game turns out. It was fantastic. And do you remember when he first arrived that there were a lot of people really angry that Aaron Ramsdale was about to be displaced as Arsenal's number one? And you look at kind of where Ramsdale's career has gone since, and what Ray is doing at Arsenal, and that, I think, it shows that Arteta is capable of making really big decisions. And he obviously wants a lot of players and competition for places. It just can be a problem, I think, if you're not winning, because everybody then starts to question whether you've got the right starting 11.
Well, thanks to Chris for pointing out that Mikel Arteta is going to hire some RAF pilots to talk to the squad. He was talking, Barry, at something I'm sure you went to, the Lead Better, Live Better Summit 2025. Maybe you might be the keynote speaker. He was chatting alongside legendary basketball coach Steve Kerr, and he said, he was asked about leadership, and he said, the British fighter planes, I will get in touch with those guys, how they communicate, because that is life or death. I'm sure they don't use 20 phrases or 20 words. If there is one word, don't say, nah, the wind is coming this way. Now you have to turn left because boom, dead. So it will be one word. I suppose you have to think of ways to get to, it's easy to mock, isn't it? I mean,
well, are they always outside of their technical area as well?
Hey.
I don't know. It is easy to. I'm trying to think. Can you call me mount of defence for bringing in fighter pilots to say this is good?
I feel contractually obliged to point out that is something Bodø Glimt do. They have a former fighter pilot doing mental coaching with the team. Anyone who's read any long read about Bodø Glimt in the last 4 years will tell you this. It has to be a part of all of those articles, and it is indeed part of all those articles. But it is stuff that seems to be working for them. I think that's
I think instead of player names on the back of Arsenal shirts, they should have call signs like Maverick and Goose and Iceman
and Biggles. Who gets Biggles? Yeah,
that would be Declan Rice. Or actually, Gyökeres, his hair, he's got quite raffish wing commanderish hairstyle, doesn't he?
Yeah, that is true.
If he could grow a moustache, and he could be Biggles.
Look, they are good, and they're defensively very good, and good defenses win things. They could easily win something this year, and then, they may mock us because we do not bring a fighter pilot in before the pod to get us in the mood.
Maybe we should.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We don't want people... We want people wasting words. It fills up time. It's good for us. It's precisely what we don't need is one-word answers. Union Saint-Gilloise 0, Newcastle United 4. Newcastle won this very comfortably, Mark. It's good. I guess the most important thing is they scored some goals because they've been pretty goal-shy recently.
Probably an easier game than it could have been because Union have to, can't play their European games at home, so they were playing at Anderlecht. So maybe home advantage was negated there, but I liked sort of the way that Newcastle attacked in the game, and it was the first time that Voltemade, Elanga and Gordon had started together, and you could see the idea behind it because if you defend high to negate the threat of Voltemada in the air, then the wingers can run in behind, and then if you drop deep, you can put crosses into a giant forward. So I think those combinations started to really look slick, and that hasn't always been the case so far from Newcastle. And in midfield, they're as strong as ever. I thought Tonali was exceptional, the way that he sort of drives the team forward, and a really good way to respond to what would have been disappointing way to lose that Premier League game on Sunday. And as I was saying to Barry earlier, these points are important, and I think it was a big win for Newcastle, having lost on match day 1.
Yeah, 3 goals in 4 starts for Voltemada, Lars. And you spoke about him already, about how he does have a good touch for a big man, and he does. And so he can sort of, in a sort of Bayern way, I guess, he can drop deep and link the play for 2 quick guys alongside him. And he's also like good in the box. I mean, it was I don't know how much he knew about that finish, but I'll give him some credit. I thought he sort of adjusted his feet quite well.
Instinctive finish, Max. Instinctive finish.
Okay.
It's really the 2 headers in the Premier League that's caught me by surprise, because that's really not something he was doing very frequently, in spite of his very large size last season. But no, he is a very clever striker, and it is something that, I mean, Captain Obvious alert here if we're back to the call signs. But like with Isak going, Newcastle kind of needed a striker, and I remember watching. I was going to watch 90 minutes of Newcastle playing Aston Villa earlier in the season, and it was extraordinary because they had to play Anthony Gordon up front in the middle, and they kept getting into crossing positions, and it's really no point putting anything in there, is there? And it seems to be something football is defaulting back into, the return of the big man, which I am delighted with. I think we all are. The big centre forward is back. And it's a tremendous thing to see. Yeah,
this week, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, I don't know how much we should pay attention to him, probably not a lot, called Newcastle. Well, he said he congratulated Stuttgart for finding, quote, an idiot who would pay that much money for Voltemada. We certainly would not have done that.
Bayern are furious because he was the one that they lined up probably for sort of next summer, and had assumed that would be a succession planning kind of for when Harry Kane leaves. And I don't think they were, and they're usually in a very powerful position with other German clubs, and they get what they want in the Bundesliga, and they wouldn't have been expecting Newcastle to have paid that much money. But I think Eddie Howe said it best when he was just talking about what the market is. They
were trying to get him this summer as well. They just couldn't. Stuttgart were holding out for a price that they just couldn't pay, and I do wonder if it's sometimes that because we watch a lot of the Premier League, we consume a lot of media to do with the Premier League, we cover the Premier League, we kind of assume that the prices and the money that's being thrown around in this league is in any way normal. Like the discrepancy between the financial situation in England and the rest of Europe, including a team like Bayern, is quite stark at this point. So we see, Newcastle have dropped 70 million on a striker, and I say, that seems like normal behavior. Just any other place in the world, it's very abnormal. Like these sort of sums do not exist in football in the same way they used to.
2 nice spots. Sam Dalling, Podder in the crowd cheering Anthony Gordon's first penalty, and Barry, our friend Sofiane Boufal. There he was. Your Boufal, it's true.
Yeah, Sofiane, formerly of Southampton, plays for Union. There's a few good stories there, the Union lineup. Kevin McAllister, brother of Alexis, Liverpool's Alexis, he was playing for them. And their captain is a fella called Christian Burgess. During the first half on TNT, Adam Somerton was portraying him as this modern day Dick Whittington who left Portsmouth to go and play for this down on its luck Belgian side Union. But instead of having a bag on a stick and a cat, he packed, I think, 7 bags into the back of his Audi A5 and off he went. So he's the skipper, and Adam's story sent me a Googling, so I found an article on the BBC. He's a history graduate and a vegan. He went to Borough at one stage, and Tony Mowbray, so I think, made it a condition of signing him that he had to finish his degree, which seems like a very Tony Mowbray thing to do. Hats off to him for that. And then there was another fella, Ross Sykes, who went to Union from Accrington Stanley, and he's a boyhood Newcastle fan. So it was a massive deal for him to come on and get some game time in the Champions League against Newcastle.
Interesting stuff. And that'll do for part one. Part two will begin with PSG's win at Barcelona. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So PSG left it late. They beat Barcelona 2-1. What a high line right at the end, Mark, from Barcelona. So watching that going, what are you doing?
Thinking of other ways to kind of talk about Barcelona when they're defending, but it is just such an obvious flaw in what they do. Although I feel hypocritical because I love watching them play. And one of the reasons they're so exciting going forward is because they put pressure so high up, and to do that, the defenders have to sort of be on the halfway line or even sort of beyond that at times. But there is a game state situation there, and I think once you're in injury time, don't leave yourself that vulnerable. It happened last season against Inter where they had the game won, and I don't think you need to be so adventurous at those times as well. It was a really interesting match. I think one of the improvements that the Champions League has made now is that you do get these sort of headline acts every single week, and that wasn't really the case in the last group stage. It's just a shame so many players on both sides were injured, particularly for PSG, Marquinhos at the back, João Neves in midfield, and then all of the front three were missing. And so it was an unusual front three for PSG, Maulu and Bai and Barcola sort of as the front three, but they still had Lee and Gonzalo Ramos on the bench. So frightening depth, really. I think that Barcelona were the better side over the course of the 90 minutes. The Lamine Yamal versus Nuno Mendes kind of battle on Barcelona's right was the highlight of the game. I think that the referee, Michael Oliver, was right not to send Nuno Mendes off. I didn't think that the foul when he was already on the yellow card on the edge of the box was necessarily a yellow card, but I know Barcelona were angry that wasn't given. And it was a decisive moment, really, because Luis Enrique reacted to that by bringing on Lucas Hernandez, played him left back. And I think that him and then Nuno Mendes were able to stifle Lamine Yamal, who I thought had been the best player on the pitch for an hour, but then slowly PSG just got a grip and a handle on it, and then won it right at the end through Ramos. So a big win for Paris Saint-Germain, just in the context of proving that they can do it with so many players out, because last season, it felt like they had a nice run in terms of injuries. Like, you knew what their starting 11 was every week, but they've proven they can do it other ways now.
Nice line from Sid, writing about Nuno Mendes, saying he was going past people like Carl Lewis at a sports day. Worth mentioning Rashford as well, Lars. So I think 6th successive game he's had a goal or an assist.
Yeah, he's making contributions, and this is, I guess this is what they were hoping for from him, and that I think a lot of people are hoping that he'll kind of find himself. He's ended up in a situation which is kind of perfect. Like, he's getting plenty of minutes, but it's not like he has to play every single minute and be the guy who's pulling the cart all the time. And I think the expectations are probably a little bit lower than they were at United. It's not the same spotlight on him at all times, and it seems to be working in a pretty good way. I want to flag up that I'm continually baffled by the situation with Gonzalo Ramos, he comes on and scores the winning goal, but it is slightly odd that promising and talented that he may be, that Seni Mayulu is starting ahead of him, and Ramos feels like every time I'm watching PSG he's coming on and scoring goals. Like, it's almost constant, and you can look at like his looking at his stats is maybe a little meaningless because he tends to be like a super sub for a team that dominates their games, but he scores an extraordinary amount of goals for the amount of minutes that he's on the field. But Luis Enrique seems to like quite aggressively not fancy him. I think it's fair to say, and it's quite odd. And it's quite odd that he didn't move in the summer, and it remains a little odd, I think.
Maybe he's just happy being a finisher. That's what he likes to be in every way. Speaking of finishers, John, amongst others, came in with it's an open goal, but we'll take it. This Højlund guy looks pretty good. Maybe a Premier League team should take a punt. Napoli 2, Sporting 1. Both goals set up by Kevin De Bruyne. We know Kevin De Bruyne is good, but we didn't really see Rasmus Højlund be good for Manchester United. But they're very different finishes. They're very different goals, Barry. But they look like, if you'd never watched him or you'd never been in the Premier League, just go, that guy's just a really good centre forward.
Yeah, and if either of those opportunities had come to him at any point last season, you'd have bet the farm on him missing both of them. And I suppose it's just indicative of what confidence can do for somebody. And it helps that Kevin De Bruyne is providing the assists after the game. Højlund, or his people, I'm not sure whether it was him or representatives, put on social media that me scoring 2 goals with Kevin De Bruyne providing both assists was not on my 2025 bingo card. We were discussing bingo for reasons I won't go into before the game, or before we started recording this podcast. I didn't have Rasmus Højlund knowing what bingo is on my bingo card, I have to say.
Well, my nan would have, Barry, because she'd have had 2 cards as we were discussing her. So she used to play for 2 people.
We do have bingo in Scandinavia. Like, it is a thing.
Oh, okay.
It's not as...
I thought it was a particularly English pursuit or pastime. So,
what's the Norwegian for bingo, and is it just bingo?
Yeah, it's very much bingo. Yeah, I assume the same as I have. Again, I wonder about this. Made me think: is just leaving Man United the key to success and happiness in life? And I wonder if this also applies to like members of staff and people who have just worked in the ticket office. And I swear we have, obviously they famously used to have a lot of staff, and now they have slightly fewer staff. I guarantee you, people who have worked for Man United and have then moved on with their lives are listening to this pod right now. They must be. And I would like for them to write in, like, has everything come together for you? Like, have you had tremendous success in your professional and personal life almost immediately after no longer working for Man United? Because it just seems to be very, very consistent.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, who has left and gone on and played incredibly well? Of course, McTominay. Anthony's done very well at Betis, hasn't he? Rashford is doing well at Barcelona. You have Højlund here. Am I forgetting any? Am I forgetting like hordes of them?
I put Lukaku in that bracket. He's gone to Italy and won the league there after leaving United.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of seems staggering, or maybe we just don't notice the ones that leave and aren't good because it sort of helps for this sort of amusement of just Manchester United getting into every conversation. So I just thought they were really good goals. The first touch is good. Gets it out from his feet. Looks like he's quicker than he was at Man United. Finishes well. The second is a really brave header. You're spot on, Barry. I just think there's no way he'd have scored those ones.
This time last year, he wouldn't have got it out from under his feet. He'd have tripped over his own feet. To be fair to him, while his spell at United was anything but a success, he wasn't getting much service when he was ploughing a very lone and forlorn furrow up front.
That is true. Qarabag 2, Copenhagen 0. Lars, you volunteered to watch this one. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the Horseman from Azerbaijan. I did watch it, and in the sense that it was on as I was tidying my apartment. But it was Qarabag had the better of the first half. It's kind of a weird playing surface. It was like Copenhagen were more sloppy than you'd expect in possession. Qarabag were moving the ball a lot better. FCK improved, I thought, in the second half, but they couldn't. They had more chances, but they couldn't find a way to score, and eventually lost 2-0. It was not massively eventful and life-changing for me, I have to say, and on behalf of my Scandinavian brethren, I was a little bit disappointed that they couldn't get anything out of it, but that's 2 wins and 2 for Qarabag. You have to respect it.
Qarabag are subscribing to the Langdon view, the preposterous Langdon view that winning games early in this competition is quite handy. I don't buy it for a second.
Yeah, well, yeah, you'll have the last laugh, Barry, when Qarabag don't win the Champions League,
yes.
Won't you? Borussia Dortmund 4, Athletic Bilbao 1. What did you make of this, Mark?
I think from Athletic have been one of, I think, the biggest sort of disappointments so far. They've had a hard enough start, playing Arsenal and then away to Borussia Dortmund. But I expected more from them this season, just overall. I know that Nico Williams has been injured and he's a very important player for the team. But just, I don't think they should be losing 4-1 against the Borussia Dortmund team that's definitely not, a strong version of Dortmund and not as good as the ones we've had before. But Guirassy is, I think, one of the most weirdest players around because he just scores so many goals, and it was a kind of a fluky goal he got last night as well. But he's sort of goal record is just sensational. But whenever I watch him, I don't actually feel like he's that good. He just one of them players that just scores goals and lots of them. They'll go in any which way, and this was one of those cases. But a good result for Dortmund. Poor from Athletic.
Does anyone have any strong thoughts on Villarreal 2, Juventus 2, or Leverkusen 1, PSV 1, Barry?
We discussed overhead kicks earlier, and Federico Gatti scored an excellent one for Juventus. Big centre half. Not the kind of goal you would expect to see a big centre half scoring. He didn't boot anyone in the head. He just struck the ball. So well done him. Apart from that, I do not have any thoughts.
I mean, I guess the boot was head adjacent, but no one really stuck their head into it, I guess. But it was a very good overhead kick, for sure.
I suppose, how late can you put your head into the foot? Like if Trevor,
this is the key.
Yeah, Trevor Sinclair's gone up and he's taken it. If a Barnsley defender was to run into his foot now, it's unlikely the goal, that would be chalked off. But, in the moment, could you have the presence of mind and the bravery to just headbutt any errant foot, and therefore the overhead kick would be disallowed? Anyway, Europa League, Europa Conference League tonight. Celtic Braga, Forest Midtjylland, Villa go to Feyenoord, Rangers go to Sturm Graz, Crystal Palace go to Dinamo Kiev, Aberdeen, Shakhtar, Shamrock Rovers at Sparta Prague, and Shelbourne versus Häcken. So if anything dramatic happens in those, we'll cover those on Monday. As well as that, we'll cover the Premier League, and we'll look ahead to the weekend of fixtures in just a second. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Chelsea-Liverpool, probably the game of the weekend. And it is interesting now Liverpool are on this, this disastrous 2-defeat run, Mark.
Yeah, I do think there's been an overreaction following those 2 defeats. Players were rested against Galatasaray. It's not an easy place to go if we're talking in cliches. And the Palace game, like first half, Palace were definitely on top. Second half, I felt like Liverpool were the team that I wasn't surprised they got the equaliser, and they were the ones that I felt were going to get a win. And I think that Palace are a good side this year, and they've just lost it right at the end. I wouldn't be that concerned just yet. I think that there is an issue with Wirtz just not settling in and accommodating him, and being sort of one person down in midfield as a consequence has unbalanced them slightly, but I'd still say they're in a better spot than Chelsea, who didn't have much of a pre-season. I'm not sure if that's the reason for some of the injuries. PSG spoke about earlier have got injuries as well, but they're not the only 2 teams in that situation. But Chelsea have got a lot of defenders out through suspension or injury, and that's not ideal when you're playing against that Liverpool front three. And I spoke to a Chelsea season ticket holder yesterday who said he was still like behind Maresca, but in his sort of friend group, there's definitely a turning with some. And so I think they've got, within the next few Premier League games, they've got Liverpool and Tottenham. If he loses both of those, I think he will sort of lose a fair chunk more of those that are kind of on the fence at the moment. I
mean, come on, Mark. When did Chelsea ever lose to Tottenham? I mean, they just never, ever.
No, that's a very fair point. Gary Lineker, maybe, but it's a long time. Or Dele Alli as well, but doesn't happen very often.
The thing about Chelsea, Lars, is Liverpool have signed lots of players, but you sort of have a vague idea of how they're going to, the starting 11. So I find myself sort of impossible to know what Chelsea will do. I mean, I know it's early in the season; it takes time for teams to settle, and Mark has mentioned all the injuries and suspensions. But they're just such an odd team.
Yeah, it does feel like they haven't quite congealed into a consistent 11, a consistent team. That's true. I still feel like we can be pretty sure. I was about to start saying what I think the lineup will be, and I realized no, we cannot be pretty sure. Halfway through that, I was like, no, I don't got it. Well, Pedro will be up front, I'm sure, and both Enzo and Caicedo will start, and probably Pedro Neto, I guess. The thing with Chelsea as well right now, they've had a man sent off in 3 of the last 4 games, which seems bad. Like this is very unhelpful if they're trying to get results. And I think for this game in particular, now they have something like 4 center halves missing, so they'll be probably a little bit makeshift at the back. So against that Liverpool front line, could we make it 4-5? I wonder. It seems like a thing that could happen.
Who will play down the left? Do you think Garnacho? I'm trying to think who would be up against whoever Liverpool chooses right back, and whether Szoboszlai stays at right back.
I mean, I would like to say Estevao because he looks so exciting, like in the sort of unending stream of talented guys in their late teens, early 20s that they've been buying since the Blue Toad Bowley takeover. Estevao is the one. Like, obviously, Cole Palmer, obvious example, but of the more sort of left field ones, Estevao is the one that looks like, my God, like this guy could be an actual global superstar at some point. He looks so incredibly exciting. So I would like to see him as a neutral here, just have as many minutes as possible going forward.
Nuno goes to the Emirates, Barry. You sort of touched on this, I think, yesterday, but it will be interesting to see how West Ham defend corners. And if Nuno has managed to do anything against a team that scores so many more goals from corners than anyone else.
Yeah, the West Ham will be provided with as stern a test as you're going to get when it comes to defending corners against Arsenal. It's very hard to see anything other than an Arsenal win in this game, but there's the possibility West Ham will have a bounce of sorts following the departure of Potter. I think, did they win there last season?
Yeah, relatively speaking, they've got a good record at the Emirates, given the kind of the quality gap between the two teams.
And this is the kind of rake Arsenal, well, last season's Arsenal obviously did tread on and get slapped in the face. I don't think that will happen this weekend, but I wouldn't rule it out either.
Ange goes to St James's Park with Nottingham Forest. What have you made of the Ange Ball 2 in the Premier League, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's not started very well. It's not a big surprise that it hasn't started that well. I mean, to put a manager that's so different to the previous one in charge of a team with no pre-season, doesn't feel like the wisest decision from Mr. Marinakis. Didn't feel like it was the strongest interview process either. I think that people knew for a long time that Ange was going there, and it was. I think it's all a bit odd, really. Postecoglou will want to get back into the Premier League, but it just feels like a tricky one to take because Nuno had done such a good job, playing such a different way. To have an immediate impact, I think, would be hard for a lot of managers. And now they've got the Sunderland game. You felt like was the ideal opportunity to get the win. They lose, and then all of a sudden you've got to go to a Newcastle team that's resurgent after their Champions League win. So I think it's a horrible looking game for Postecoglou. I think I'd be more surprised if he was still there at the end of the season than not. I just don't see it working out, I have to say.
Was it this game last year, Lars, where Chris Wood turned into Ronaldo and scored a hat-trick? Or was that the year before?
I feel like that could be any game in the last couple of years. This Chris Wood thing doesn't make any sense to me, but it just keeps happening. I'm getting, I don't mean to make light of this, but I'm getting Tottenham PTSD from this start of Nottingham Forest, because I haven't watched any of the games in their entirety, so I'm not going to have too strident opinions on this Ange Boyle iteration, but they keep not winning games, and I keep checking the stats, and it seems like they had a lot of shots and stuff, and then I see Ange interviews going, oh yeah, I thought we had the better of that game, and then I check the result and they haven't won, and I was like, yeah, that's very familiar. I've had quite a lot of that. Just sort of note of compassion to the Nottingham Forest fans who are like, yeah, you're not alone. A lot of us have experienced this before.
I would argue in Ange's favour, they really should have won that game against Sunderland. They had a lot of shots.
I've heard it.
The Sunderland keeper had a brilliant game.
They played well at Betis as well, and still concede 2 goals.
Yeah, it's funny how that keeps happening.
Sunderland go to Old Trafford. Barry, you are quietly confident, or perhaps loudly confident, going into this game?
I give Sunderland every chance of turning them over, definitely. And if they do, it's going to be interesting. Last game before an international break. I would imagine if United lose at home, given their current run of form, to a newly promoted side, that will not go down well at Old Trafford, in the stands or in the boardroom. Hopefully, Sunderland can do a number on them just to see what happens next. you'd give any team in the Premier League a chance to beat Manchester United at the moment, and Sunderland have got off to a great start, so why not?
The early kickoff on Saturday is Tottenham's visit to Leeds, who I think are unbeaten at home. The Elland Road factor. Mark, what's the Spurs' sentiment over Thomas Frank's start? Seems like they get to this moment where it's all good, and then they've got a game that's really winnable, and they don't win it, and you just go, oh, God. And then they'll go again.
There felt nothing more predictable than pointless Wolves sort of turning up at sort of Tottenham last week with an opportunity to narrow the gap on leaders Liverpool and really struggle for 90 minutes. Leeds are good at home, seen that already, and probably kicking themselves that they didn't beat Bournemouth last week. From Tottenham point of view, like if you'd have asked me this question maybe 10 days ago, I'd have been really positive. But last couple of performances have been way short of the standards that were set in the admittedly away games, actually, Man City and Brighton. And because the attack's not flowing at all from open play, I do wonder whether they might actually be suited to playing away from home. And maybe it didn't look like that on Tuesday in Norway, but generally speaking, I think there'd just be less pressure on them to try to create. Big problem against Villarreal, against Bournemouth, and also against Wolves. So I'm staying patient with Thomas Frank, but he will need at some stage to get the team clicking in the final third.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose part of that is you need Javi Simmons to be the create. There just aren't that many creators, right, with the injuries to Maddison and Kulusevski.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and the reliance on Kudus is it's too much, really, because that has been the tactic so far this season. Give it to him and hope that he can sort of dribble past everybody. And it's not a bad tactic when it works, but it's not really sustainable. It's just, where does Simons play? I think he doesn't look comfortable out on the left, but when you're easing him into the Premier League, as Liverpool have found with Wirtz, like playing somebody like that in the centre is also, I'm not sure he's fully up to speed yet with the Premier League. He had his best 25 minutes playing centrally against Brighton, but I think that's very different when you're chasing the game in that situation rather than starting there. So I know he's one of Barry's favourite players. I'm sure he will come good, but just a bit of patience required with him.
It's interesting, he does move like Wirtz, doesn't he? They both have that sort of languid style, the way they carry the ball, it's so beautiful, but
it's just no time.
Not a lot happens. Yeah, quite a lot of time. And yeah, you're right. No time on the ball. Bournemouth, Fulham, Everton, Palace, Wolves, Brighton, Villa, Burnley, Brentford City. Anything pique your interest, Barry?
Well, Palace are on this very long unbeaten run. Could come to an end tonight, obviously, but going to Everton, I remain unconvinced by Everton. I think they've been getting a few results they haven't deserved. Who did they play on Monday? West Ham. Thought that, they were bang average in that game. But in Njai and Grealish, they have two really good wingers. They just have no one to finish off all the crosses and good balls that they provide. And that's an issue, unless, I suppose it's too early to judge Thierry O'Barry. But, they need a striker who's firing, and they don't have one at the minute.
Okay, let's go to, we'll obviously cover all those games on Monday, to Turkey Corner. Sadly for you, Mark, it's not a food-based part of the...
you won't be surprised.
Yeah.
You will not be surprised to know.
I might get my teeth done while we're here.
And I could do with some doner meat. So we're
all the cliches. Yeah, lovely. We're all winners. Korkieng, if I've pronounced it correctly, says, hi, on Wednesday you're asking how many Turkish listeners you had. To my knowledge, let's face it, it's not that extensive. I'm the only one. I found Football Weekly right after Galatasaray's 3-2 away win against Manchester United to check what the English media thinks. And I've been an avid listener since. Listening to the Liverpool game reactions of the pod was a full circle moment for me as a fan. I will have a nose job to breathe properly next week, not a vasectomy. So Barry's unimpressed words are more than welcome. It's been 30 years since I had a big operation, so you can say I'm a bit excited. Our first nose job on the pod is very exciting. So look, good luck with that. Let us know how it goes. But you're not alone. We had a raft of Turkish listeners get in touch. Cenk, presumably not Cenk Tosin, just says, hi Max, we're here as Turkish listeners. Cheers. Rizvan says, long-time listener of Football Weekly, lifetime Galatasaray supporter. After hearing you wonder in today's episode, I can confirm you have at least one Turkish fan in me. I can also confirm that the Galatasaray goal music is the melody of I Will Survive, but based on a Turkish version of the song by Ajda Pekkan, who is considered Turkey's version of Madonna. I appreciate Galatasaray being considered dark horses in the Champions League this year, considering last time we were in the Champions League and had Wilfried Zaha and Hakim Ziyech. You said the team had an Expendables feel to it. Big fan of the podcast. Thanks for all you do. Lots of people got in touch talking about I Will Survive. Yannick saying, just want to chime in on your take on Galatasaray's goal tune. It is actually I Will Survive, specifically the version made by the Rotterdam pub après ski group called Hermes House Band. Okay, so we have some controversy here. It is coincidentally the goal tune of Feyenoord, Rotterdam, Celta Vigo, and I believe Benfica. Have a nice week. Thanks for the nice podcast. Cheers, Yannick. Novid says, Turkish listener here who lives in Spain. It's a Man United fan that's been listening since 2008. My favourite member of the pod is Barry.
Is the right answer.
Could have been original, Novid. Yeah, you could have been original. But you chose to follow the herd, like the sheep that you are. Anyway, thank you to everyone, to all our Turkish friends, and to everyone around the world. Thanks for listening, and that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you, Max.
Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard. We'll be back on Monday.
This is The Guardian.